Have you ever felt an ice-cold shiver run down your spine, even on a hot summer day in Denver? That's your instinct, telling you the ice is cracking right beneath your feet. I ignored it. I ignored it until the day I walked through the bright glass doors of Etheria Solutions and realized I hadn't just lost a husband, I was financing his new life. My name is Eliza. I'm 36 years old, and I am, by trade, a senior software engineer. I build systems. I find the flaws in logic. I make things work, which is why I should have known better, why I should have trusted that cold shiver I'd been ignoring for months. The Denver sun was bright, almost painfully so, bouncing off the downtown skyscrapers as I pulled up just before noon. I'd told my team I was taking a long lunch. I had a surprise, a bottle of expensive champagne, tucked into my leather tote bag, chilling against my laptop. This was for Mark, my husband. Mark, at 38, had finally made it. He'd just been promoted, as he called it, to a full partner at Etheria Solutions. It was the hottest new tech startup in the state, and he was helping lead it. I pushed through the heavy glass doors, and the noise of the city street was instantly vacuumed away. The lobby of Etheria Solutions was not just nice, it was an exercise in minimalist wealth. We were talking millions of dollars in imported Italian marble that stretched out in a sea of polished gray. The air didn't smell like an office, it smelled like expensive, freshly ground coffee and some faint, woody scent I couldn't place. My heels clicked, an unnervingly loud sound in the sterile quiet. It was all glass and brushed steel, cold to the touch and reflecting a cold, blue light. I couldn't help but smile. I felt a surge of genuine pride. This was it. This was what all the late nights and his constant stress had been for. This was the opportunity he'd been so excited about. I knew, intimately, what this place was built on. It was built on my savings, a significant chunk of them drained over the last year to give him this chance. Seed money, he'd called it, a smart investment in our future. A young woman with a surgically perfect smile looked up from a sleek white console. "Can I help you?" "Hi," I said, beaming. "I'm Eliza Vance. I'm here to surprise my husband, Mark Vance. I'm just taking him to lunch." The woman's smile faltered. It was a micro-expression, a bug in the code. But I saw it. Her eyes flicked to a screen I couldn't see, then back to me. Her posture tightened. "Oh," she said. "Ma'am, Mr. Vance is in a very important meeting right now. He didn't have anything on his calendar." "That's the surprise part," I said, my smile feeling a little stiffer. "It's fine. I can wait. I just wanted to celebrate his promotion." "His promotion." The receptionist repeated the word slowly, like it was foreign. "Of course." "Please, have a seat." The silence from her was sudden and absolute. It was the way she immediately focused on her keyboard, typing nothing, refusing to meet my eye. The air conditioning hummed. The smell of coffee was suddenly overwhelming, almost bitter. I didn't sit. I felt restless, a strange vibration under my skin. I wandered across the expanse of marble, pretending to admire the architecture, my tote bag suddenly feeling heavy. A massive wall of frosted glass dominated one side of the lobby, acting as a partition. Etched into it in an elegant, sharp font were the names of the executive team. I scanned it, looking for Mark's name, expecting to see it under partners or operations. I found it at the top. My breath hitched. Mark Vance, Chief Executive Officer, CEO. He had told me he was a partner, a junior partner, even, not the CEO. A rush of confusion, and then, a strange, dizzying pride. Why would he downplay it? Maybe he wanted to surprise me. And then I saw the name right next to his. Same font, same size. Sophie Vance, Chief Creative Officer. I just stood there. The marble felt like it was sinking beneath my feet. Vance. Sophie Vance. My blood turned to slush. This wasn't a typo. My mind raced, trying to find a logical explanation. A cousin, a sister he'd never mentioned in the 15 years I'd known him. We didn't have any Sophies in the family. The name just hung there in the air, etched into the glass, mocking me. My heart was no longer beating. It was hammering, a frantic, trapped bird against my ribs. I could feel the blood pulsing in my ears, drowning out the quiet hum of the lobby. I walked back to the desk. My voice, when it came out, was terrifyingly calm. I sounded like I was asking for the time. "I'm sorry, I was just admiring the wall," I said, forcing a light, curious laugh. "I didn't know Mark had a relative working here. Who is Sophie Vance?" The receptionist looked up. She was pale. She looked genuinely afraid. She swallowed, a small, audible click in her throat. "Oh," she said, her voice a strained whisper. She attempted that nervous, high-pitched laugh. "Oh, that's his wife, ma'am. She's wonderful. They founded the company together." His wife. They founded the company together. The words didn't compute. They were just sounds. I was his wife. I was Eliza Vance. The bottle of champagne in my bag felt like a lead weight. The seed money. My money. Before I could even form a response, before I could collapse, before I could scream, a heavy glass door at the far end of the lobby hissed open. Laughter spilled out, bright and careless. Mark emerged. My Mark. He looked fantastic. He was wearing a new, dark blue suit I'd never seen, tailored perfectly. His arm was wrapped tightly, possessively, around the waist of a woman I had never seen before. She was stunning. A vibrant blonde with teeth so white they looked like they belonged in a commercial. They were leaning into each other, sharing a private joke. Then Mark looked up. He saw me standing at the reception desk. The laughter died on his lips. Sophie, the blonde, looked from him to me, her smile faltering into confusion. And I saw his face. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't shame. It wasn't the look of a man caught in a terrible mistake. It was pure, unadulterated annoyance. He was angry that I was there. He was inconvenienced. That was the moment the ice didn't just crack. It vaporized. In the second it took for my brain to process the receptionist's words, "That's his wife, ma'am," the world fractured. The sound of the lobby, the low hum of the air, the distant click of a keyboard, all of it just dissolved into a high-pitched ringing in my ears. I saw Mark's annoyance, his irritation at my presence, and in that nanosecond, the part of me that was a wife shattered, and the part of me that is an engineer took over. The system had failed. It was a catastrophic error. The only thing to do was to switch to diagnostics mode. I felt the muscles in my face pull themselves into a smile. It was a bright, detached, professional smile, the one I used for hostile clients and incompetent project managers. It was a mask, but it was a good one. "Mark, wow," I said. My voice sounded breezy, startlingly normal. I walked toward them, my heels clicking on the marble, the sound precise and steady. "This place is incredible. You undersold it." I extended my hand, not to Mark, but directly to the blonde. "You must be his new colleague. I'm Eliza Vance." Mark looked completely lost. He had clearly braced for a scene, for tears, for screaming. He had not, under any circumstances, prepared for polite networking. His confusion was a small, cold point of satisfaction in the absolute void that had just opened up in my chest. "Eliza," he stammered, his hand falling from the woman's waist. This is Sophie, our chief creative officer. The word hit me like a physical blow. Sophie took my hand. Her grip was firm, her manicure perfect. Her smile was wide and radiated a fake, polished warmth. "Sophie Vance," she corrected him smoothly, her eyes locking onto mine, a clear and deliberate emphasis on the last name. She was marking her territory. It is so wonderful to finally meet you, she gushed. Mark has told me nothing about you. She looked down at my tote bag. Oh my God, is that the new Celine? I am obsessed. Her friendliness was an act of aggression. The bottle of champagne in that bag suddenly felt like it weighed 100 pounds. Thank you, I said, my own smile aching. I turned to Mark. Congratulations, honey. CEO, that's quite the step up from partner. We really have to celebrate. Right, he said, running a hand through his hair. I was going to tell you tonight. It all happened so fast. I'll bet. I glanced at my watch, a sharp, practiced movement. Oh, damn. Look at the time. I'm so sorry. I can't actually stay for lunch. My biggest client just had a server meltdown. I've got to run. A total 5-alarm fire. Oh, Mark said, relief washing over his face, so obviously it was insulting. That's too bad. Rain check, I said brightly. I started walking backward toward the main doors. It was a pleasure to meet you, Sophie and Mark. Seriously, the office is stunning. I didn't wait for a reply. I turned, and I walked. I kept the smile fixed on my face as I crossed the expanse of marble. I kept it fixed as I nodded goodbye to the receptionist, who looked like she'd just witnessed a bomb diffusion. I kept it fixed as I pressed the elevator button. The wait felt like an eternity. Finally, the steel doors slid open. I stepped inside. I turned to face forward. The doors slid shut, sealing me in. The moment the metal sealed, the mask dissolved. My face went numb. I didn't collapse. I didn't cry. I didn't make a sound. I simply leaned my head back against the cool steel wall of the elevator and stopped breathing. I just stood there, suffocating in the silence, for all 40 floors down to the garage. When the doors opened, I walked to my car. I got in. I sat for a full minute, staring at the concrete wall of the parking garage. Then I started the engine. I didn't go home. I couldn't. The very thought of our house, our bed, our life, made me physically sick. I drove on pure autopilot, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, my mind a blank, cold static. I drove away from downtown, away from the life I thought I had. I drove to Cherry Creek. I pulled up to the valet at the Four Seasons. I walked into the lobby, a monument of impersonal luxury, and booked their largest available suite. I needed a clean space. I needed a headquarters. I needed a war room. The suite was vast and beautiful, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the mountains. I ignored the view. I dropped my tote bag by the door. I walked to the mahogany desk, pulled out my phone, and dialed. My hands were shaking, a fine, high-frequency tremor. Jenna answered on the second ring. Eliza. Hey, what's up? Jenna and I met at MIT. She's the godmother to my we don't have children. She's my best friend. And she's one of the most ruthless corporate lawyers in the state. Jenna, I said. My voice was a monotone, a flat line. Cancel your afternoon. Cancel your night. I don't need my friend right now. I need my lawyer. And I need you to find me the best forensic accountant in Colorado. Not a good one. The one they hire when people are about to go to prison. There was a half-second of silence. She didn't ask me if I was okay. She just said, I'll make 2 calls. Send me your location. I'll be there in 30 minutes. I hung up. I sat at the desk, opened my laptop, and logged into our joint bank account. Our future fund. The one I'd been pouring 10% of my 6-figure salary into for 8 years. It was almost empty. The balance was $212.48. I scrolled down. My heart, which I thought had stopped, began to pound a slow, heavy, painful beat. Transfer, transfer, transfer. Dozens of them. All large. All ending in the same memo. Etheria Solutions, seed costs. He had drained us. He had taken hundreds of thousands of dollars. My money. I traced the dates. The first transfer was 6 months ago. 6 months. He told me he got the promotion 6 months ago. With trembling fingers, I opened a new tab. I went to the website of his old firm. I navigated to the Our Team page. He wasn't on it. I did a site search for his name. Nothing. I did a wider Google search. I found it. A press release from his old company, dated almost exactly 6 months prior. Mark Vance has resigned his position to pursue other opportunities. He hadn't been promoted. He had quit. He had been lying to me, every single day, for half a year. Every time he said he was at the office, he was there, with her. The sickness rose in my throat, hot and acidic. Our house. I opened the app for our home security system. I scrolled back through the event logs. Last weekend. He'd been so insistent I go on that spa weekend with friends, a trip he had surprised me with. I found the log. Saturday night, 8:17 p.m. Front door disarmed. Mark's code. I clicked the file to view the footage from the living room camera. There he was. Mark. And there she was. Sophie. They walked in, laughing. She kicked off her shoes as if she lived there. He walked straight to our bar cart, my bar cart, the one I'd restored myself, and poured 2 glasses of my 25-year-old single malt scotch. They toasted. I watched, frozen, as he kissed her. A deep, familiar kiss. I watched as he led her up the stairs, to my hallway, to my bedroom, to my bed. The camera feed in the app reverted to a live view of my empty, quiet living room, but I couldn't look away. This wasn't just an affair. This wasn't just building a company. This was an invasion. This was a replacement. They were systematically, meticulously, erasing me from my own life, and they were using my own money to do it. Jenna was at the hotel suite door in 28 minutes. She didn't hug me. She didn't offer condolences. She walked in like she was entering a boardroom, all sharp angles and focused energy. "This is Arthur," she said, nodding to the man behind her. He was in his late 50s, with a nondescript suit and wire-rimmed glasses. He looked less like a financial bloodhound and more like a high school math teacher. He shook my hand. His grip was dry and firm. "Mrs. Vance." "Eliza," I corrected, my voice flat. "Let's get the unpleasantries out of the way," Jenna said, setting her briefcase on the glass coffee table. "Arthur is the best forensic accountant in the state. He is also very expensive. His retainer is $25,000. I paid it out of my personal account 30 minutes ago. You can pay me back when this is over." I just nodded, numb. "Thank you. Where do we start?" "With the money," Arthur said, opening his laptop on the desk. "I need access to every account you and your husband share, and every account you don't." For the next 2 hours, the only sound in the suite was the clicking of keys. Jenna sat across from me, cross-referencing names and corporate filings on her own laptop. I gave Arthur the login to our joint account, the one with $212 left. I gave him my personal savings, my 401k, my investment portfolio. Arthur was silent for a long time. Then, he let out a low whistle. "Well, Mrs. Vance, your husband wasn't terribly sophisticated, but he was thorough. Over the last 6 months, he's made systematic bi-weekly transfers from your joint savings, totaling just over $400,000. I felt the air leave my lungs. "All of it," Arthur continued, "was deposited directly into a single corporate account for Etheria Solutions, LLC. There are no other significant capital inflows, no other investors. Just you. You didn't just give him seed money. Eliza, you are the entire venture." Jenna cursed, a sharp, violent word. "He didn't just empty the account, Eliza. He liquidated your stock positions to do it. The market is up 12% since he did that." "So what does Etheria do?" I asked, my voice a hollow echo. My mind was stuck on the number. $400,000. Jenna was already on their website. "It's all corporate buzzwords. Synergistic data logistics. Predictive AI forecasting. Wait." She clicked on a product tab. A slick, animated demo video began to play on her screen. A voiceover, deep and confident, explained how their proprietary algorithm could predict supply chain disruptions weeks before they occurred, but I wasn't listening. I was watching. The animation showed stylized lines of code scrolling past. It was meant to look high-tech and impressive, but it wasn't gibberish. I recognized it. The variable declarations, the function calls, the unique, recursive logic structure. "Stop," I whispered. "Jenna, stop the video." She paused it. The screen froze on a string of code. My code. My hands flew to my own laptop. I logged into my personal encrypted repository, the one I kept my side projects in. I clicked on a folder labeled Beacon. It was my passion project for the last 3 years. A predictive analytics algorithm I was designing, not for logistics, but for identifying network security breaches before they happened. It was the most elegant, complex, and valuable piece of work I had ever written, and I had been so proud of it. I remembered, with a sickening lurch, a night about 8 months ago. We were in my study, sharing a bottle of wine. I was excited. I'd had a breakthrough. I'd pulled up the repository and explained the entire architecture to Mark. I'd shown him the core logic. He'd been so supportive. "This is genius, Liza," he'd said, kissing my forehead. "Truly, this is worth millions." I looked at my screen. I looked at Jenna's. He hadn't just been supportive. He had been prospecting. He hadn't just stolen my money to build his new life. He had stolen my mind. He had stolen my work. He had built his entire multi-million-dollar company on my intellectual property. "Eliza, what is it?" Jenna asked, seeing the look on my face. "He stole it," I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the room. "He stole my code. That's Beacon. That's my algorithm. He just took it." Jenna stood up from the couch. Her face, usually so composed, was a mask of cold fury. "Eliza, listen to me very carefully. This is not a divorce. This is not a civil dispute. This is grand larceny. This is wire fraud. This is a federal crime. We are so far beyond marital assets, you are in a different solar system." As if on cue, my phone, lying face down on the desk, buzzed. I picked it up. A text from Mark. "Insane day over here. Hope the client fire isn't too bad. Love you." I stared at the message. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of it. The lie. The casual, "love you." Jenna watched me. "Are you going to answer?" My thumb moved, all on its own. The engineer took over again. I was no longer a wife. I was a system under attack, and I was building my firewall. Crazy here, too. I typed, "Almost done. Talk tonight. Love you too." I put the phone back down. "Arthur," I said, my voice devoid of all emotion. "Keep digging. I want to know who else is involved." "Already on it," he said, not looking up. "I've been pulling the incorporation documents from the Secretary of State. The LLC was filed 7 months ago. The registered agent is a dummy firm, but the articles of organization list the board members." "Let me guess," Jenna said. "Mark Vance and Sophie." What was her name? Keller. "Mark Vance and Sophie Keller." "Yes," Arthur said, turning his monitor to face me. "But they aren't the only two. There are 4 founding board members." I leaned in, my eyes scanning the document. Mark Vance, Chief Executive Officer, Sophie Keller, Chief Creative Officer, and then, the final 2 names, the ones that shattered the last remaining piece of me. Chloe Davis, Head of Human Resources, Ryan Davis, Head of Sales. My blood turned to ice. Davis, my maiden name. Chloe, my little sister, who I'd just paid off $5,000 in credit card debt for. Ryan, my older brother, who I had mentored, who I had coached, who I had helped get his first job out of college. They weren't just in on it. They were executives. They were on the board. They had been sitting at my dinner table, drinking my wine, complaining about their jobs, all while they knew. They all knew. They were all in on it. I stared at the screen. Chloe. Ryan. My mind simply refused to process it. Chloe. My little sister. I pictured her just 2 weeks ago, sitting in my kitchen, crying because she couldn't make her car payment. She was drowning in credit card debt again. I just don't know what to do, Liza. She'd wept. I'm such a mess. I'd held her. I'd transferred $5,000 into her account right then and there. I'd told her not to worry, that we'd figure it out. She had hugged me so tightly. You're the best sister in the world, she'd whispered. You always save me. Head of Human Resources. And Ryan, my big brother, the one I'd always looked up to, even as I surpassed him professionally, the one who had drifted from job to job, full of big ideas that never went anywhere. I'd spent countless hours rewriting his resume. I'd called in favors I'd never called in for myself to get him his first real corporate job. I'd coached him through the interview. He'd taken me out for a steak dinner to celebrate. I owe you, sis, he'd said, raising his glass. I won't forget this. Head of Sales. This was a different kind of pain. This wasn't a crack in the ice. This was the ground beneath me dissolving into acid. The man I married was a thief. The woman he was sleeping with was an imposter. But my family, my own blood, they were holding me down while the others emptied my pockets. Jenna, I said, my voice barely audible. They knew. My brother and sister are on the board. Jenna looked at the screen and her jaw went rigid. She didn't say, Are you sure? She didn't say, There must be a mistake. She just looked at me, her eyes filled with a cold, hard rage that matched my own. Who else? She asked. I picked up my phone. My hand was steady now. The tremor was gone. I was in the eye of the hurricane. I scrolled to Mom. My finger hovered. I needed to know. I needed to hear the last lie. I hit call and put it on speaker. She picked up on the third ring, her voice breezy and cheerful. Eliza, honey, I was just thinking about you. How are you, sweetie? Hi, Mom, I said, my voice a perfect imitation of a daughter calling to check in. I'm fine, just taking a break between meetings. How are you and Dad? Oh, we're just wonderful. We were just talking about how proud we are of Mark. My stomach clenched. Oh yeah. Yes, he's just doing so brilliantly with that new business. It's about time he was his own boss. Don't you think he's so smart? That husband of yours. A real go-getter. We always knew he'd do something big. The fawning, the practiced adoration I'd heard it my whole life. But this time, it was a weapon. Yeah, Mom, it's really taking off. I was actually calling because I was thinking about investing. You know, put some of my own money into the company. The line went silent. Not a long silence, but a heavy one. A guilty one. Oh, my mother, Margaret, finally said. Her voice had changed. The breezy cheer was gone, replaced by a careful, almost condescending tone. Oh, no, sweetie, you shouldn't do that. Why not? I asked, my voice still light. It seems like a sure thing. Well, you know, these startups are just so risky, incredibly volatile. Your money is safe where it is. You're an engineer. Honey, you don't understand these high finance deals. It's just better if you let Mark handle all that. He knows what he's doing. You just keep your nest egg safe. She was protecting him. From me. She was actively, consciously, lying to me to protect the man who was stealing from me. I looked at Jenna. Her eyes were closed, as if in pain. You're probably right. Mom, I said. Thanks for the advice. I've got to run. Talk soon. Okay, honey, love you. Love you too, I said, and ended the call. I set the phone down on the desk. I realized I was completely, utterly alone. My entire family, my husband, my sister, my brother, my mother, my father, they had all held a meeting, and they had taken a vote, and I had lost. They had chosen the thief, because the thief was promising them a piece of what he stole. Jenna, I said, why Why would they do this? Jenna was already typing, her face grim. Mark is a charismatic sociopath, Eliza. He finds what people want, and he promises it to them. Let's see. Here we go. The incorporation agreement has an addendum on stock allocation. She turned her screen. He gave them titles, but the titles are meaningless. He gave them what they really wanted. Stock. A huge block of preferred stock for Chloe and Ryan. Not common stock, like he would give an employee. Preferred shares, the kind you give to major investors. He promised to make them rich, and all they had to do was sell you out. So they did, I whispered. They did. I think I'm going to be sick. Wait, Arthur said. He hadn't spoken since the phone call. His voice was quiet, and it cut through my nausea. What is it? I asked. I've been tracing the capital inflows, he said. The $400,000 from your joint account is the bulk of it. There are a few small $5,000 deposits, probably from friends and family. But there's one other, the largest single investment, the angel investment, you might call it. How much? Jenna asked, walking over to his desk. $250,000, Arthur said, transferred exactly 6 months and 2 weeks ago, the day the LLC was officially formed. Who did it come from? I asked. I almost didn't want to know. Arthur looked at me over the top of his glasses. The pity in his eyes was the worst part. It came from a trust. The Graneliza M. Davis Beneficiary Trust. I didn't recognize the name. I don't know what that is. It's an inheritance, Arthur said gently. From your paternal grandmother. She passed away 10 years ago. According to the documents, it's a fund that you are the sole beneficiary of, but which you do not control until your 40th birthday. He paused. The trustees, the only 2 people with access to that money, are your parents, Margaret and David Davis. I just stared. Arthur continued. They signed it over. $250,000. Your inheritance. They stole your grandmother's money and gave it to your husband and to his wife. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I felt that last piece of me, the part that still believed in family, in love, in anything it just turned to stone. The acid had finished its work. They didn't just choose him, I said, my voice a dead monotone. They invested in him, with my money. I sat in the sterile silence of the hotel suite. The revelation about my parents, about the $250,000 from my inheritance, didn't make me cry. It simply clicked the final piece of the puzzle into place. The board was set. Every single person I had ever trusted was on the other side. Jenna was pacing, her phone in her hand. That's it, she said, her voice like clipped wires. This is multi-state fraud. This is breach of fiduciary duty. This is a buffet of felonies. I'm calling a judge I know right now. We can get an emergency injunction. Freeze Etheria's accounts before breakfast tomorrow. I held up my hand. No. Jenna stopped pacing. No, Eliza. They just stole almost $700,000 from you, not to mention your IP. We have to move. If we file a civil suit, they'll know we're onto them, I said. My voice was cold. I didn't recognize it. They will bury the assets. They'll declare bankruptcy. Mark will move the code to an offshore server in seconds. A lawsuit will take years. Jenna, I'll spend $1 million on legal fees just to get back pennies. I don't want pennies. He stole my intellectual property. I don't want to sue him for damages. I want to take it back. I want the company. I want everything. Jenna stared at me. The lawyer in her was calculating. The friend in her looked a little afraid. Eliza, what are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we let them continue. We let them think they're getting away with it. I turned to my laptop. The engineer took over. This was no longer a personal crisis. It was a security breach. First, I said, we secure my perimeter. For the next 3 hours, I didn't stop typing. I systematically liquidated every asset I had left that Mark hadn't found my personal stocks. My emergency fund. I formed 3 new, anonymously named Delaware LLCs. I moved every liquid cent I had into new business accounts under those LLCs. Accounts he couldn't touch, couldn't find. I was building a firewall. Next, I said to Jenna, I need more data. This Sophie Vance. Sophie Keller, Jenna corrected. I already ran her name. Vance is a complete fabrication. I need a private investigator, I said. Not just a divorce snooper. I need someone who digs into corporate espionage. I want to know everything about Sophie Keller. I want to know who her father is. Jenna made a call. The PI was in our suite in an hour. The PI, a man named Harris who looked as unremarkable as Arthur, delivered his first report 48 hours later. It was beautiful. Sophie Keller is not married to Mark Vance, he said, sliding a folder across the table. There is no marriage license in Colorado, or any other state. We did find a vendor booking for a commitment ceremony at a private estate in Aspen 2 months ago. So, the name on the wall? Sophie Vance. Is a complete fabrication, Harris said. A branding exercise, and a very smart one. Her father is Thomas Keller. Jenna's breath hissed in Thomas Keller, as in K-Tech, the biggest competitor to Cisco in the entire western United States. The very one. Harris confirmed. Mark is playing a much bigger game than we thought. He's not just stealing from you to build a company. He's using your IP and your money to create a demonstration product. He's convinced Sophie he's a brilliant CEO, and he's using her and her fake marriage to him to get an acquisition meeting with her father. He's not trying to build a startup. He's trying to get a massive 9-figure payout from K-Tech. I just nodded. The coldness was absolute now. So he's not just lying to me. He's lying to the Kellers. He's planning to sell them stolen goods. There's one more thing, Harris said. He pulled a single sheet of paper from the folder and placed it in front of me. It was a legal document, an intellectual property assignment agreement. It detailed the transfer of one proprietary algorithm codenamed Beacon from the ownership of Eliza Vance to the full, irrevocable ownership of Etheria Solutions, LLC. The payment for this transfer was listed at the bottom, $1, and at the very bottom, on the assigner's line, was my name, Eliza Vance. It was a good forgery. He'd had 15 years of practice watching me sign checks, holiday cards, and mortgage documents, but it wasn't my signature. The E was too looped, the V too sharp. I stared at the single sheet of paper. This was the gun. This was the weapon. Jenna leaned over my shoulder. Her smile was a terrifying, razor-thin line. He's done, she whispered, almost with reverence. He's absolutely positively finished, forging a signature on an interstate contract for the transfer of intellectual property. That's not just fraud. That's wire fraud. That's a federal, non-negotiable, 20-year prison sentence. We have him. Eliza. We have him cold. I looked at the signature. I looked at the $1. All my work, my passion, my mind, sold for $1 by the man I loved, using a forgery of my own name. Not yet, I said. Jenna looked at me, confused. What do you mean, not yet? We call the U.S. Attorney's Office. It's over. No, I said, sliding the paper back into the folder. It's not enough. If we arrest him now, he's a failed executive. The company collapses. The money is gone. My family plays the victim. They'll say he duped them, too. No, he's having a launch party. He's presenting my product to his investors, to Thomas Keller. How do you know? I'm still getting his calendar alerts, I said. Next Friday, Etheria Solutions, Series A launch. He's going to stand up on a stage and present my work as his own. I want him to. I wanted him to do it in front of everyone, in front of my family, in front of his new family. I wanted to watch him fly as high as he possibly could, right before I cut the engines. We're going to that party, I said. My phone buzzed. A new email. It was from Mark. Subject: A surprise for you. Hey, honey, the email read. You've been working so hard. I wanted to do something special. I've booked you a full 3-day weekend at that spa in Vale you love. It's all paid for. You leave next Friday afternoon. You deserve it. Love. M. My blood ran cold. Next Friday. The day of the launch. He wasn't just inviting investors. He was actively removing me from the scene. I checked the calendar invite for the launch. I'd assumed it was at a hotel, or Etheria's offices. I looked closer. My breath caught in my throat. The location for the Etheria series A launch party was listed, clear as day. It was my address. It was my house. I read the email about the surprise spa trip, and my vision went sharp and cold. He wasn't just having a party. He was actively, methodically, removing me from my own home so he could perform his final act of fraud on my living room stage. I called him. My voice, when I spoke, was a masterpiece of forgery, high and breathless with gratitude. Mark, oh my God, a weekend at the Vale Spa. You shouldn't have, it's the most thoughtful thing. I'm almost crying. I could hear the smile in his voice, the smug, deep relief of a problem solved. You deserve it. Liza, you've been working way too hard. Just pack a bag and relax. It's all taken care of. I'll pack tonight, I said. I leave Friday afternoon, right? That's right. The car will pick you up at noon. I love you, I said. I love you too, he replied, and hung up. On Friday, I packed a suitcase. I kissed him goodbye at the door, a long, lingering kiss that tasted like ash. I got in the town car he'd ordered. I had the driver take me 2 blocks, then rerouted him to the Four Seasons. I didn't need to worry about him getting into the house. I had stopped by the house 2 nights before, claiming I'd forgotten a file. I'd made a show of fumbling in my purse. Damn it, I'd muttered. I must have left my main key at the office. It's fine. I have this old spare. I'd handed him the single physical key that used to work on the back door. He'd pocketed it, unaware that I had replaced the entire smart lock system a week ago. That key was now just a useless piece of metal. Only my fingerprint, or my phone, could open that house now. I returned to my suite, my war room. Jenna was already there, pacing by the window. Arthur, our forensic accountant, was quietly working at the desk. It's time, I said. I opened my laptop and pulled up the grid view for my home security system. My house. The feed was live. At 2 p.m., the catering vans arrived. At 3, the florists. At 4, the rental company, unloading dozens of chairs and high-top tables. They were moving my furniture. They pushed my sofa, the one I'd spent 6 months saving for, against the far wall to make room for a portable bar. At 5 p.m., the hosts arrived. Mark, Sophie, Chloe, Ryan. I watched them on the camera in my great room. They were electric with excitement. Sophie was directing the staff, pointing. That painting is hideous. It has to go. Put a banner there. She was pointing at a landscape my grandmother had painted. My brother and sister were laughing, carrying in boxes of Etheria-branded merchandise, USB sticks, stress balls. They were setting up a welcome table in my foyer, my family, handing out party favors in my home. Mark stepped up to the temporary lectern they'd placed in front of my fireplace. He was practicing his speech, his voice booming with confidence. He was looking at the massive 120-inch projection screen we'd installed for movie nights. We built this company from the ground up, he declared to his imaginary audience. Just an idea, a dream, and a relentless passion to innovate. Chloe and Ryan applauded, cheering him on. Sophie kissed him. I sat there, watching them celebrate their victory, and I finished my work. Jenna. Now, I said, my eyes never leaving the screen. Jenna nodded, her face grim. Filing. While Mark practiced his lies, Jenna was electronically filing the emergency motion in federal court. She had the U.S. District Court judge on a video conference standby, a favor she'd pulled. We weren't asking, we were presenting. We laid out the evidence in a single, devastating package, the Beacon Code repository, time-stamped 3 years prior. the articles of incorporation, the bank records showing the theft of my $400,000, the forged IP transfer agreement, selling my work for $1. And finally, the signed affidavit from my parents' bank confirming the illegal $250,000 transfer from my trust fund. Jenna's phone buzzed on the table. She looked at it. He's in. The judge signed the TRO and the writ of seizure. He called the evidence overwhelming and the signature a brazen act of criminal fraud. The U.S. Marshals are on alert. They will serve the warrants on your signal. Good, I said. Now for the guest list. I made 2 calls. The first was to a private security firm run by ex-Denver police, not bodyguards, crowd control, professionals. I hired a team of 6 for the evening. Their job was to secure the perimeter and ensure a calm, orderly exit. My second call was to a journalist, Sarah Jensen, a senior tech reporter at Wired. She was notorious for her takedowns, and I knew from an article she'd written last year that she had a special, profound hatred for Thomas Keller's predatory business practices. Sarah, I said, it's Eliza Vance. I have an exclusive story for you. I'm going to give you the complete documented implosion of Etheria Solutions, and, as a bonus, I'm going to hand you Thomas Keller's daughter on a platter, committing federal wire fraud in front of a live audience. There was a moment of stunned silence. Where and when, she asked. My house, tonight, 7 p.m., bring a camera, you're on the list. I hung up. Everything was in place. The law, the muscle, the media. Now, for the final piece. The technology. I was a software engineer. My house was a smart house because I had built the entire system from scratch. I had root access. Mark thought he was the CEO. He was, at best, a guest user with limited permissions. I opened the admin console on my laptop. I didn't just change the locks. I had control of everything, the audio system, the lighting cues, and, most importantly, the central feed for the 120-inch projection screen. Mark could plug his laptop into the wall, but he was plugging into my network, and my network would only show the audience exactly what I wanted them to see. It was Friday night, 7:15 p.m. The air was cool and still, holding its breath. I was sitting in the back of a black, unmarked Chevrolet Suburban, parked under a dying streetlight 1 block down from my own home. The tinted windows turned the streetlights into dim, blurry stars. Jenna was beside me, silent, her hands clasped in her lap. In the driver's seat was a man named Miller, the head of the private security team, a solid wall of muscle in a dark suit who hadn't spoken in an hour. The car was silent, the engine off. It felt like a decompression chamber before a deep, cold dive. We watched them arrive, a steady stream of Teslas, black Audis, and high-end Mercedes pulling up to my front walk. The venture capitalists from Sand Hill Road, flown in just for this. Local tech CEOs, smelling money, potential partners. And, as promised, Sarah Jensen from Wired. I watched her step out of a rideshare, flip open a notepad, and walk past the driveway, her eyes scanning everything. They were all walking into my house, greeted at the door by smiling cater waiters holding trays of champagne. My champagne. Then, a familiar silver Lexus pulled up. My stomach turned to cement. My parents, Margaret and David. I watched, my pulse a single slow beat in my throat as they got out. My mother, Margaret, was wearing a new, shimmering silver dress, a designer dress. I recognized it. I'd seen the charge for it, $3,000 on the joint account statement, just before Mark drained it. My money! She looked ecstatic. She and my father walked up the path and embraced Mark, who was waiting at the door. Then they both of them, hugged Sophie, a warm, familial embrace. They welcomed her into the family. On my doorstep, I glanced at the laptop on my lap. The screen was a 4x4 grid of my own security cameras. I maximized the great room feed. The party was in full swing. The noise was a dull roar through the laptop's microphone. And there they were, Ryan and Chloe, My brother and sister. They were working the room, gliding through the crowd like they owned the place. Ryan was shaking hands with a man I recognized as a major VC, handing him a business card, clapping him on the back. Chloe was laughing, her Head of Human Resources badge gleaming under my recessed lighting. They were executives. They were finally the important people they always wanted to be. Jenna's phone vibrated, a single sharp buzz on her lap. She looked at the text. U.S. Marshals are in position, she said, her voice low and tight. 2 at the front, 2 at the back. They're on a separate comms channel. They will not move until they get your signal. Miller's team is already securing the perimeter exits. Miller, the driver, spoke into a tiny microphone on his wrist. All assets are in place. We are green to go. I took a deep, slow breath. The air in the car felt thick and hot. I didn't feel afraid. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel angry. I felt nothing. A profound, hollow, surgical emptiness. I was a structural engineer, and I was looking at a building that was condemned. My only job was to make sure it came down clean, without any collateral damage to the street. Jenna looked at me, her face pale in the darkness of the car. "Liza," she said, her voice losing its lawyer-like edge for just a second. "Are you absolutely sure you want to do this yourself? We can just let the marshals go in. You don't have to watch this." I turned my head and looked at her. "I built that house," I said, my voice steady. "I wrote the code that he's selling. I paid for that silver dress on my mother's back. I am going to be the one to end it." Jenna just nodded once, her expression hardening back to steel. "Okay. What's the signal?" I looked back at my laptop, the great room. The ambient chatter was dying down. The crowd was quieting, turning toward the fireplace. Mark was stepping up to the lectern, a wireless microphone in his hand. Sophie was standing just to his right, beaming, her hand resting possessively on his back. Chloe and Ryan stood in the front row, looking up at him with pure, unadulterated adoration. The lights in the room dimmed, all except for a single, bright spotlight on Mark. My spotlight, my smart home theater cue. Mark tapped the microphone. "Thank you," he said, his voice smooth and confident, booming through my laptop speakers. "Thank you all for coming. Welcome." He smiled, a wide, charismatic, practiced smile that I used to think was just for me. "Welcome to Etheria. Welcome to the future." He paused for effect, letting the words hang in the air. A future that my wife, Sophie, and I dreamed of. A future we built from scratch, with a revolutionary new technology. My wife, Sophie. He said it. He said it in my house, in front of everyone. That was the signal. I looked at Miller. I looked at Jenna. Go. The signal was given. Miller and Jenna got out of the car. I stayed, my eyes glued to the laptop feed, my fingers resting on the admin console of my home network. On screen, Mark was in his flow. A revolutionary technology that will reshape global logistics. We call it Project Etheria, and it represents a quantum leap in predictive innovation. Right as the word innovation left his lips, I executed the command. On the laptop feed, I saw the 120-inch screen behind Mark abruptly go black, a huge, empty void. Mark faltered. The sudden loss of his slick corporate logo behind him made him look small. He turned, confused. He chuckled nervously, tapping the laptop on his lectern. "Apologies. Ladies and gentlemen, a slight technical difficulty. The gremlins must be out tonight." The crowd tittered politely. Sophie smiled, but her eyes darted nervously to the side. "Just give us one moment," Mark said, still fumbling with his computer. "Don't worry, Mark," I whispered to the screen. "I'll take it from here." I executed the second command. The screen flickered, then flooded with bright, white light. It wasn't the Etheria logo. It was a high-resolution scan of a document. At the bottom of the screen, blown up to be 3 feet high, was a signature. Eliza Vance. My name. A low murmur rippled through the room. People were leaning forward, confused. What was this? Mark froze. He stared at the screen, his face draining of all color. He knew exactly what it was. Sophie grabbed his arm, her knuckles white. "Mark," she hissed. "What is that?" The screen changed. Now, it was a split view. On the left, a header, Repository, Evance Private, Repo. File Beacon Core, C, last modified March 2022. On the right, Repository Etheria Solutions, Prod, File Etheria Core, C, last modified June 2025. Underneath the headers, 2 columns of code scrolled slowly, in perfect synchronization. My code, his code, word for word, variable for variable, comment for comment. It was a digital twin, a direct, blatant, irrefutable theft. The murmur in the room grew louder. The VCs in the front row were no longer confused. They looked angry. Sarah Jensen, the reporter, had her phone up, recording the entire screen. "Mark," Sophie said, her voice no longer a whisper. It was a sharp, panicked demand. "What is going on?" Mark was mute, paralyzed. He looked like a statue. Then, I hit the final command. The screen changed again. Now, it was a bank statement, a transfer, a massive one. Transfer from Gran Eliza M., Davis Beneficiary Trust, and an arrow pointing to Deposit to Etheria Solutions, LLC. The amount was circled in bright, digital red $250,000. A collective gasp went through the room. That was the breaking point. From the front row, I saw my brother Ryan and my sister Chloe finally snap out of their stupor. They realized what was happening. This wasn't a glitch. It was an execution. "The AV system," Ryan yelled, pointing to the back of the room where the control rack was. "Someone unplug it." He and Chloe both bolted, pushing through the stunned crowd, making a desperate run for the equipment. They never made it. 2 men, who had been standing quietly by the bar, stepped directly into their path. They were 2 of Miller's security team, both built like refrigerators, both wearing impeccable dark suits and earpieces. "I'm sorry, sir," one of them said, his voice calm and utterly final as he put a heavy hand on Ryan's chest. "You can't touch that equipment." "Get out of my way!" Ryan shouted, trying to shove him. The man didn't move. He didn't even blink. Chloe tried to scramble around the other guard, who simply sideways stepped, blocking her path as well. "Ma'am, I need you to please return to the party." "This is our party. This is our house!" Chloe shrieked, her voice cracking with panic. And right on cue, as the entire room turned to watch my siblings being physically blocked by security, the front door of my house swung open. The chaotic noise of the room vanished into a sudden, shocked silence. Jenna walked in. She was dressed in a severe black suit, her hair pulled back. She looked like a wartime consul. She commanded the entire room's attention. Behind her, framed in the doorway, were 2 men. They were not caterers. They were not investors. They were wearing dark blue uniforms with ballistic vests. U.S. Marshal was emblazoned in bright yellow letters across their chests. The room didn't just go quiet. The air was sucked out of it. Jenna walked past the stunned guests, her heels clicking with the terrible, precise sound of a clock running out. She didn't stop until she was standing at the foot of the makeshift stage, looking directly up at the 2 people frozen in the spotlight. Jenna's voice was not loud, but it was so sharp and cold that it cut through the entire silent room. She didn't step onto the stage. She commanded it from the floor. "Mark Vance, Sophie Keller," she announced. Her voice was devoid of any emotion, a pure instrument of the law. "You are hereby served with a federal temporary restraining order and a writ of seizure. The United States District Court for the District of Colorado has found probable cause that you are in violation of multiple federal statutes, including wire fraud and the interstate theft of intellectual property." The VCs from Sand Hill Road didn't just freeze. They took a coordinated step back, as if a live wire had been dropped on the floor. I saw Sarah Jensen, the reporter, pan her phone from Jenna to Mark's ashen face, then back again. Her expression was one of pure, predatory delight. "What?" Sophie shrieked, her voice finally breaking. The perfect, polished CEO was gone, replaced by a terrified girl. "You can't do this. This is our company. This is our party." "It was your company," Jenna said, her voice flat. "As of this moment, it is a crime scene, and you are holding this party in a home that was purchased with funds stolen from my client. This entire company, Ms. Keller, was built on stolen assets." As if on cue, the two U.S. Marshals moved. They didn't run. They moved with a heavy, methodical purpose. One of them walked directly to the lectern and, ignoring Mark's paralyzed form, picked up the Etheria-branded laptop. He opened a roll of bright orange stickers and slapped one onto the lid. U.S. Government property seized as evidence. The other marshal walked to the rack of servers they had set up by the wall for their live demo. He began unplugging them, one by one, and placing the same orange stickers on each unit. This, finally, is what broke my mother. The sight of the physical seizure, the men in uniforms, the orange stickers. "Stop this!" Margaret shrieked, her voice cracking. She ran from the front row, her silver dress shimmering, and lunged toward Jenna, her hands out as if to grab her. "Stop it! This is a mistake. It's just a simple misunderstanding." "No, Mother, it's not." The voice came from the back of the room. It was mine. Every head in the room swiveled. The glass doors to the patio slid open, and I stepped inside. The room went so quiet I could hear the ice melting in the glasses. I was wearing a crimson-red power suit. My hair was pulled back. My makeup was perfect. I was not the grieving wife. I was not the victim. I was the CEO. I didn't look at Mark. I didn't look at Sophie. I walked, my heels clicking on my own hardwood floors, past the investors, past the reporter, past Jenna. I walked until I was standing directly in front of my parents, Margaret and David. They looked at me, their faces a mask of horror and disbelief. "Eliza," my father, David, stammered, What is the meaning of this? You're ruining Mark's night." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had taught me to ride a bike. I looked at the woman who had packed my lunches. "And you," I said, my voice as cold and clear as the glass in my hand. I pointed a single, steady finger at both of them. "You will be served with a separate civil suit by morning, for breach of fiduciary duty and the embezzlement of $250,000 from my trust fund." My mother's hand flew to her mouth, a choked, strangled sob. My father just stared, his mouth open. "You stole my inheritance," I said, my voice never rising. "You gave my grandmother's money. To him, to her. Eliza, honey, we thought it was a good investment." My father pleaded. "It was," I said. "For me." A new voice cut in, this one male, with a sharp, authoritative bark. "You lied to me." A man I didn't know stepped out from the cluster of stunned investors. He was in his late 60s, impeccably dressed, with a face that looked like it was carved from granite. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at his daughter, Sophie. It was Thomas Keller. He had been in the crowd the entire time, watching. "Daddy," Sophie whispered, and in that single word, her entire facade of chief creative officer evaporated. She was just a child, caught. Thomas Keller ignored her. He looked at Mark, his eyes filled with a disgust so pure it was almost impressive. "You lied to me," he said again, his voice rumbling. "You came to my office. You told me this IP was yours. You told me you built it." Mark couldn't speak. He just shook his head, a pathetic, trembling gesture. Keller scoffed, a short, sharp sound of contempt. He looked away from Mark, as if he was something too disgusting to observe. He looked at Sophie. You brought this fraud, to my table. You embarrassed me. He then turned, not to me, but to Jenna. He pointed a thick finger at her. My lawyer will be in touch with your office in the morning, he snapped. Then he turned, and, without a backward glance at his crying daughter, he walked straight out the front door. Thomas Keller's exit sucked the last remaining energy from the room. It was over. Sophie, who had been staring, paralyzed, at her father's retreating back, finally crumpled. She sank to the floor, her designer dress pooling around her, and began to sob. But it wasn't the sound of heartbreak. It was the dry, racking, humiliated sound of pure shame. Her connection to the money, her reputation, her entire plan had just walked out the front door. Mark turned to me. The shock on his face was hardening, calcifying into a familiar, ugly rage. His eyes were wild. He was shaking, not with fear, but with the fury of a king who had just been deposed in his own court. Eliza, he hissed, taking a step toward me. Eliza, what have you done? You're destroying everything. You're destroying our things. His voice cracked on the word our. It was that word, that final, insane claim of ownership that made everything go still and sharp inside me. No, Mark, I said. My voice was quiet, but it sliced through the room. You are mistaken. There is nothing ours here. You destroyed everything that was yours when you forged my name. This, I pointed to the projection screen, which was still displaying the side-by-side comparison of my code. This is my code. I turned my head, my gaze falling on the two people still being held by the security guards. My brother and sister, Chloe and Ryan. They were cowering, looking at me with wide, terrified eyes. I gave them no comfort. I felt nothing for them. Chloe, Ryan, I said, my voice flat. You are fired from my company, and you are out of my life. Chloe let out a tiny, whimpering sound. Jenna had seen enough. She stepped forward into the center of the room. All right, ladies and gentlemen, she announced, her voice booming with authority, cutting off any further discussion. The party is over. As I stated, this is an active federal investigation. I'm going to ask everyone to please leave the premises immediately. This property is now pending seizure by the federal court. Please exit in an orderly fashion. That broke the spell. The investors, the VCs, the tech partners they didn't run. They fled. They scrambled for the door. A sudden crush of expensive suits and panicked faces. They were on their phones, murmuring to their own lawyers, a stampede of rats leaving a ship that was already at the bottom of the ocean. This company, this party, was now toxic, and they wanted to be as far away as possible. Sarah Jensen, the reporter, held her phone steady, her face grim with focus. She panned across the room, capturing every fleeing investor, every orange sticker, every tearful face. She had her exclusive. Within 60 seconds, the room was empty. Empty, except for me, Jenna, the marshals, and Miller's security team. And them, the 6 of them, Mark, Sophie, Chloe, Ryan, Margaret, and David. They were huddled together in my foyer, a pathetic, defeated little island of thieves. The spotlight was off. The music was dead. They were no longer the hosts of the party. They were just intruders. Miller's team moved, creating a polite but unbreachable wall, gently, firmly, guiding them toward the open front door. Wait, my mother whimpered, pointing at a chair. My purse, my coat. You will get nothing, Jenna said, her voice like ice. You will leave, now. They were herded out. Out of my house, onto my front walk, under my porch light. They stood there, dispossessed and blinking, on the grass I had paid for. Mark was the last one. He stood in the doorway, framed, looking at me one last time. His face was a wreck. The anger was gone. The panic was gone, all replaced by one final, desperate gamble. "Eliza," he whispered, his voice broken. "I love you." I almost laughed. It was the last lie, from a man who had nothing left. I looked straight into his eyes. The man I had loved for 15 years. The man I had shared my bed with, my dreams with, my code with. I searched for any part of him I recognized. There was nothing. The void was complete. "No, Mark," I said, my voice quiet. "Just for him. You don't. You loved my idea. You loved my money. You loved what I could build for you. But you never, not once, actually saw me." I turned my head to Miller, the head of security, who was waiting by the door. "Get them off my property." He nodded once. "Ma'am." He stepped forward, and I turned my back. I didn't watch them go. Jenna gently pushed the heavy front door shut. The sound of the deadbolt locking echoed in the massive room. The U.S. Marshals were quietly taping up boxes of servers. Jenna was speaking to them in a low voice. I stood alone in the center of my great room. It was a disaster. Half-eaten plates of shrimp, abandoned, half-full champagne flutes, napkins crumpled on the floor, and the orange stickers gleaming on my fireplace, on my servers, on the laptop. I had my house back. I had my company back. It was completely empty. I stood there, surrounded by the wreckage, and for the first time in 6 months, I took a deep, full, clean breath. Thank you for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you are listening from, so please comment below and share your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and give it extra support by hitting that hype button so this story can be heard by more people.